we've got Steve, he, him, out in Nebraska, gonna talk to us about the second law of information dynamics and quantum wave function. Look, all of those words are well above my head, Steve, but we are gonna try it. You're chatting with SR and Armin. What is up, man? What you got?
Hey, well, firstly, I wanted to thank you guys for the awesome job you did in handling my call a couple weeks ago regarding the WOW signal of the terrestrial genetic code. And kudos to Johnny B. Angel for his prompt reference to the pandathumbs.org critique of the WOW signal of the terrestrial genetic codes researchers' methodology for unraveling their supposed WOW signal of the terrestrial genetic code.
Yeah.
That was amazing. You guys are amazing. But what I wanted to discuss
thank you, Steve.
If you're not really familiar with what's the collapse of the wave function, that
I have some familiarity there. Yeah, I'm just not I'm sorry, I don't mean to like cut you off or anything, Steve. I was just saying like I have some familiarity with that. I think Armin does too. I think we have actually had conversations, he and I, on this show in the past about it. But neither of us are like physicists or anything. But yeah, I mean, what about that is interesting you? What about that?
Understand. Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not anybody that says they understand quantum mechanics. They really don't understand quantum mechanics. But just to kind of simplify the gist of what that is everything kind of seems to exist in a fuzzy quantum state until it's observed, and then it materializes into a matter with
now real quick can I just jump in real quick for a second, Steve? I know I'm cutting you off a little bit, but I just want to jump in real quick because I think what you just said there about like everything matter exists in this kind of weird fuzzy quantum state until it's observed, like I'm kind of on board with that, man. Maybe there's some adjusting to be done, but I just want to real quick make sure when you say the word observe, are you talking about like the action of vision as done by the human eye or other existing biotic materials like sight, or are you just saying like observed in the sense of interacted with, like observation in the broadest of sense?
Being measured or interaction with another quantum state would probably count as being go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. That's good. No, I was just that's kind of where I am when I hear that term. When I hear that term in this space, I'm like, cool. That's what I think people are meaning when they say observe. Awesome. I'm glad we're on the same page. Keep going, brother.
Okay. And then the other point I mentioned was the second law of infodynamics. And what that is that was a new law of physics recently discovered by a scientist, I think, by the name of Melvin Bobson. I hope I have that right. But basically, the gist of that is that the entropy tends to decrease, and it flows in the opposite direction as in the entropy in the second law of thermodynamics, which that tends to increase over time, so it seems to go in the opposite direction. And I was just wondering if you guys thought maybe these are indicators of our universe being designed to conserve computational resources in order to be simulated by a simulation program.
Yeah, I'll kick it to Armin to see if he has anything specific. I will happily say here and show my ignorance on the second law of infodynamics. That's definitely something I will need to look further into, man. And I'm happy to do it. I always love to learn stuff. I have had discussions before about the collapse of particles into wave functions relating to simulation theory and so forth. I think all of those are making a really, really massive leap. And I don't think we have any good justification to then get to that point, because if we're accepting the conclusion of all of existence is some simulation, there's a lot of stuff that is implied there, right? Like, as far as we know, simulations just don't fucking spring up from nothing. Like some entity, some conscious agent has to create them. So then we'd have to say, okay, well, there's something that created that simulation, and there's a bunch of other stuff too. But let me throw it to Armin for a second and see if he has any more to say.
Well, so I'm looking at the second law of information dynamics. It states that entropy of an isolated information system tends to increase over time. So if it's isolated information, okay. This implies that without external intervention, information systems naturally become more disordered and less organized. So I'm also not familiar with this one. I am familiar mostly with the second law of thermodynamics that says overall entropy keeps increasing over time. And I don't know what conclusions you want to get from this law, but even with but it seems like the conclusions that you want to get might actually be the fact that entropy increases over time. We don't even need. What are you trying to? Can you explain what are you trying to get from this, or like what conclusion are you trying to get from this law that you just introduced to us? Can you, in one sentence, if you can, short?
Well, it's basically, it just seems that the way, like, I guess this was discovered when Dr. Melvin Bobson was analyzing how COVID mutated, and it just, the information states that were observed tended to go in the opposite direction as you expected, and it just kind of, and he was thinking, well, maybe it's, the universe is behaving in such a way that it wants to conserve computational resources where information tends to get condensed over time. And that, to me, is what I would expect if our universe was simulated. And, simulation, I never even considered the notion of us being simulated until the movie The Matrix came out. And about the same time, you had the philosophical argument from Nick Bostrom of simulation theory, and then The Sims came out about the same time. So, okay, this is kind of interesting, but I'm not going to seriously consider this. But then when Dr. James Gates found computer error correction code in string theory equations, that just about knocked my socks off. It's not just any particular error correction code. It's the same kind of computer code that was founded by Claude Shannon in the 1940s or 50s.
So
some kind of
I ask you. So wait a minute. Now I understand this law. I understand this law a little bit more. This is basically completely in line with the second law of thermodynamics. So there's nothing new here. So sorry, I completely misunderstood because I've never heard what you just said before. So I was a little confused.
It seems to go the opposite of the second law of thermodynamics.
But now I'm looking at it, it doesn't. It doesn't go the opposite.
Oh, it doesn't? Okay, I understood it to be where...
I mean, based on what I'm seeing right now, it doesn't. It basically aligns with it. So here's the thing. What does the second law of thermodynamics has to do with us being in a simulation? How are you connecting these two together?
It's just information.
Yeah, so we have entropy. Entropy is increasing.
Information seems to be becoming more compressed and condensed over time, and would that not be an indication would you not expect that to happen if computational resources are being conserved to run a simulation? Or maybe I'm making a little bit of a stretch here.
I do. Here's what I would say. I would say, like, so we have information, and then we have when you say computation, we're talking about like stuff like intelligence or computer processing and stuff like that. So what? Let me know if I'm understanding what you're saying here. Okay, so as entropy increases, like we have like pockets of condensed energy around our universe, and it seems to want to, spread as wide as possible and becomes less, so that we have less clusters of energy in different parts of the universe. Ever since the Big Bang, the beginning of our universe was the most condensed form of energy that we had, and now it's all spreading apart, and all forms of condensed energy everywhere in the world is trying to get more spread out. Like, for example, our sun here is a form of one form of very condensed energy that is trying to spread out. So one thing that we notice is that there are different, as if we keep different systems around the world find different ways to spread energy, and life, for example, is a very effective way of increasing entropy. So that's why you expect to find life somewhere in the universe at some point. And also at some point, in like intelligence becomes one of the most effective waves of form of life to basically increase entropy. So just with the second law of thermodynamics is completely in line with why we will eventually have life on some planets, or why that life will eventually have intelligence, right? So we have information, and when do we have the computation of that information? So the information itself and the computation of that energy, that information, is two separate concepts, right? So we can understand why not just life, but intelligence itself is always, like, the theory is that intelligence is an emergent property of matter itself. Like, if you have matter for long enough, you will eventually get to intelligence. Like, it's something that it will always emerge out of matter. So this is all true. This is all in line with the second law of thermodynamics as the most effective way to increase entropy. All of this are in line. None of this all of a sudden jumps to us being in a simulation. I mean, there are other ways using mathematics to try to suggest why we're in a simulation. You know, like the people who say that we're in a simulation, they try to use probabilistic arguments for why, you know, given that for every base reality, we're going to have millions and millions, given that intelligence is an emergent property of matter, for every base reality, meaning any reality that is not a metaverse or is not a silicon-based world, we're going to have millions and millions of metaverses, or millions of artificial universes. So statistically, if we had to guess, we would have to be in an artificial world rather than the base reality. That's the argument why some people make, including Neil deGrasse Tyson, for why, for example, we are likely to be in a simulation. That's the argument some people make, which is an unfalsifiable claim, but it doesn't really matter if it's true, because our reality is indistinguishable from a base reality, so it doesn't really matter if we are in one or not. But again, what does entropy have to do with us being in a simulation? That's not the argument usually people make for why we're in a simulation. Did anything I say make any sense?
Yes. I have to study the. It's something I just read. I really probably need to understand it a little better. But
it sounds dense, dude. Like, don't beat yourself up for that.
Being in a simulation. Now, a question, guys. Do you guys think that the metaverse or other virtual reality worlds would allow mainstreamed simulated beings to escape this God-forsaken simulation?
Yeah, I don't know about that, man. I mean, for sure.
This is all just.
Yeah.
This is all just. It doesn't. Here, don't go down this route, Steve. This is going to make you. This is going to get you to an existential crisis. This is going to keep you up at night, and it's not going to serve any purpose. It's not going to change your life in any meaningful way. Okay. There's no way to prove that we're in a simulation. There's no way to disprove. So if it's going to make you question the meaning of life or how important life is to you, then if you're doing it for fun and it's interesting, do it. But you have to understand this is an unfalsifiable claim. And at the end of the day, you have to be pragmatic about your life. The reality that you're experiencing is indistinguishable from a reality that is not in a simulation. And that's all that should matter to you. Why does it matter if we're in a simulation, if your reality, your experience with your reality is exactly as if it's the base reality? Why would that matter to you?
that you're exactly correct in that. I mean, if we're in an simulation indistinguishable from a base reality, then it doesn't matter, what. So you're correct about that. Now, with the string theory, what do you think about the error correction codes in string theory? String theory, and that's not proven to be true, but if it were true, a lot of physicists believe that it is true. Then what do you think about there being error correction code in string theory? Isn't that kind of peculiar or kind of odd? Doesn't that seem to indicate that we're simulating?
It's not that Armin and I don't necessarily find this topic interesting, right? Like I know I definitely do. Like I think it's cool, right? And again, with infodynamics specifically, the second law of infodynamics, I know that I am ignorant and I need to look further into this, man. And maybe there's something out there that when I read it, I'll just be like, holy shit, Steve was totally fucking right. But for me, I think the big problem when we do this whole, okay, well, that now we're in a simulation, is just the logical construction of it, and in and of itself seems to me like it's flawed. We're reaching a conclusion that isn't anywhere in our premises, man. Like at no point in time did we go, well, it would have to be a simulation if X, Y, and Z are true. We find out that X, Y, and Z are true. Therefore, we're in a simulation, man. We don't have that crucial detail of, yeah, if we find this out, that shows us it's a simulation. So stuff to look into, man. Interesting as all hell. Let's keep looking into it. But currently, I think we're coming to a conclusion that just isn't warranted by the data.
I think we'll have to wait in time to see how realistic these simulations get. But
absolutely,
I think in time, and it's not far off. But right now, we just don't know.
Yeah, and I agree. I think in the future we will most likely get a better understanding that will lead us to either accepting this understanding more or rejecting it, more strongly. You brought up string theory, and like a good handful of years ago, man, like when string theory first started getting out there and people were all of a sudden everybody got real hot about it for a minute, man. Everybody was like, fuck yeah, man, that's it. We figured it out. And then a few more years passed, and then a bunch of people came up and were like, no, actually, there's really no good basis to believe any of this, and we should push back on this. This is just us wasting our time and spinning our wheels. So yeah, it's good that we have these disagreements in science. It's not good that we take these newly found understandings of the world around us and then try to apply it to all of these conclusions that aren't necessarily warranted by the data, man. And again, I don't think that's malicious. I don't think that's something we do purposefully, like as assholes or anything. I think honestly, it's something we do as people. Like when we just find something out and it seems to kind of fit in this one box, it's like, oh yeah, maybe that does actually fit in that box. Fuck yeah, it's the whole fucking box. But again, ultimately, you were right, man. Time will tell on this.
No,
go.
I don't think time will. I don't think time will. I don't think there's anything. No, I don't think that there's anything that we're going to discover that will resolve this. There's two things that people point out is like quantum physics, like string theory. I don't think there's anything that you're going to find in our particles that shows that we're in a simulation. Anything that it seems like, oh, wow, this is interesting. Could this be because we're in a simulation? It could easily be because of something else. So nothing in quantum physics is going to resolve this question. And with regards to us creating metaverses, I already can tell you what's going to happen in the future. I already know, like, you're like, oh, what if we create realities that is going to be indistinguishable for our reality and we can't tell the difference? Then that's going to show that we're probably in a simulation ourselves. Well, you don't have to wait. We are going to get to a point where we create virtual realities. Like, we already know that that's going to happen. So why do we have to wait to, like, what? Let's wait and see if we could create that. Well, I will tell you, we are going to create that. So there's nothing that is good. We are going to come up with. There's no additional information that is going to resolve this. This is you're going to have to live with the fact that you don't know this. Okay, there is no additional information or discoveries in the future that is going to resolve this. Just make your peace with it.
Do you think we could, and Steve, we're going to let you go. Actually, I'm just going to ask Armin one more question and poke back on him, but thank you so much, brother. This was really good.
Yeah. You guys are freaking awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Seriously, Steve, we appreciate it. And even though there's stuff that we need to learn further on it, it's still good to have it brought up, I think. But okay, Armin, real quick. I want to ask you something on what you just said. Do you think there's anything as we delve further into physics, quantum physics, and deeper understandings in that? Do you think there's anything that could rule out, like definitively, that we're in a simulation? Do you think we could learn anything that's just like says to us, okay, because this fact of nature? Okay, all right, well, that's fine.
Obviously not, because anything that you discover could be the information that is anything you discover that shows that we're not in a simulation could be an information that the simulation is feeding to you. Obviously, how could you? How could you go around it?
So it's just a claim that you're just saying the claim in and of itself is unfalsifiable, and that
it's unfalsifiable.
Okay, well, that's fine. That's fine.